r/AskReddit. What is the worst thing you've ever seen happen at a wedding? At my own wedding reception, I saw my wife's grandma, who was about 98, very slowly and with a terrible sense of inevitability fall sideways off her chair. She remained in a sitting position but just slowly tilted sideways till she was on the floor, still in the exact same pose. It sounds shitty but all I could think was, duck's sake, don't die at our wedding, please don't die at our wedding. Luckily she was fine and lived for another few years to see her 100th birthday. Edit. Gee whiz, my top rated comment ever is about that time I thought my wife's grandma died at our wedding. THX for the karma. Grandma Mary was at a wedding this summer. The groom's family absolutely tore their son brother apart during the speeches. They didn't say one loving thing and went on to talk about all the mistakes he made during this life. The worst thing they brought up was how he was responsible for a car accident that put someone in a coma. I was cringing. Edit. Oh, and one more travesty. Dinner wasn't served until 10 p.m. Edit. Since people keep asking, yes, it was the man of honor, like a maid of honor, except a guy. There was also still a best man. During the man of honor speech, the guy repeatedly said the name of the bride's ex instead of her new husband. 3 times. When I first saw bride and bride's ex, I knew they were perfect for each other. Stuff like that. And he caught himself, too, every time. He was insanely embarrassed, but he still did it 3 times throughout the speech. It was so awkward watching it happen. Probably the biggest social train wreck I've ever seen. Bride's stepmother and mother got into a fight. Stepmother bit the mother. Wedding went to a screeching halt. One of my best friend's weddings, the groom got so drunk that he straight disappeared from the reception. Shit got real awkward when it was time for the wedding to be over. The venue was kicking us out and the bride and groom were supposed to take off in their vintage car and drive off to their honeymoon suite. The music went off, lights went on, and it turned into the guests searching for the damn groom. My husband finally found him in the parking lot, basically face down on his lips. He helped him back into the wedding, which was basically the most awkward walk of shame past the bride's glaring dad and grandfather. The groom was too drunk to drive. Bride's grandfather drove them to the hotel suite, which was a 30-minute drive. My friend, the bride, later told me that when they got in the room, her new husband passed out cold on the bed and she had to wander the halls in her wedding dress looking for someone to unhook her dress for her so she could get out of it. Sad. I was an attendant in my best friend's wedding. Her father walked her down the aisle and while he was not visibly drunk, he had a hard time walking behind her to sit in the pew. He stepped on her dress, ripping it from her back down to her ass. Her thong was red. They had to stop the wedding so that she could find safety pins. For the bouquet toss, a middle-aged guy forced his middle-aged girlfriend out onto the floor, then stood by her so she couldn't leave. The bouquet was caught by an excited little girl. The guy proceeded to yank the bouquet out of the little girl's hands, gave it to his middle-aged girlfriend, then ran off the floor cheering loudly to high-five one of his buddies. The little girl ran away crying. Just as the bride started walking down the aisle, her grandmother had a sudden cardiac event. We had to stop the procession and start CPR in the aisleway. What's worse is that we were in a large park, and people calling 911 couldn't give the address. I ran to the ranger's station, but it was locked. I broke a window screen and crawled through to use a landline EMS could trace and respond. She didn't make it. As an added bonus to the horrible situation, I later found out the ranger had placed a hidden camera in the women's restroom where the girls got ready dressed for the wedding. He served jail time. There was like an 8-year-old boy who had loads of confetti in his hand, so I didn't think much of it. Turns out he thought it was sugar paper and ate all of. He then proceeded to projectile vomit everywhere through the middle of the ceremony. Was one of the funniest and most disgusting moments of my life. There was this guy outside of the hotel walking up to groups of people in the smoking area, asking how much each person weighed. He was very overweight himself, and his jeans looked to be on inside out. He was severely underdressed for the occasion, and no one seemed to know him. Anyways, he would ask a person's weight, and then exclaim, "I can bench that," until one guy, I think he was a family member of the bride, got into an argument with him and started asking around if anyone knew this person, figuring that he was a wedding crasher. That's when this gentleman decided to cut a deal with everyone. If I can pick up that bench with my bare hands, can I stay for the party? To which everyone agrees, because the bench was clearly bolted to the ground. So, he walks over, puts his hands on the bench, crouches down, and with all of his might, shits his pants in front of everyone. He stood up and waddled off through the parking lot to never be seen again. I did hear throughout the night people talking about a guy who was on shrooms outside, trying to lift a bench. So, I guess he was also tripping balls. Ex-boyfriend of the bride got super drunk at the reception and started rambling loudly, heard by half the reception hall, about how the marriage was wrong and how she was the love of his life. He was there with his then new, presumably imminently ex-girlfriend. Duck knows why she invited him. Friend's wedding. The bride's nephew, about 7, I think, was the ring bearer. Instead of sitting at the front after he made it down the aisle, he decided to do karate moves in front of and sometimes behind the couple during the entire ceremony. He's in almost all their photos. Edit. An alarming number of you are worried that this was you. The boy's still too young to really be on Reddit, I think. So you're probably safe from anonymous internet judgment. LOL. Nervous groom stood with his legs straight for too long, fell forward and knocked himself out cold, hitting the first step to the platform with his head. Bridal face plant followed by a girdle breaking, which led to the dress ripping. We were partying in Puerto Vallarta, and there was a beautiful wedding going on at the hotel next door. A friend of mine was pretty drunk, then just sprinted for the wedding. He hopped the wall, blasted through the seating arrangements, then body slammed the 6-foot-tall wedding cake. He spent the next 2 days in Mexican jail, and will forever be a ducking prick in my heart. My cousin's mother-in-law told my cousin that her dress was ugly and then called the next day to ask if they had sex. Super awkward. My cousin is super religious and modest and was waiting for her wedding night to do anything, so it was extremely embarrassing for her. Bridesmaid had a seizure just as the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride." My dad's friend's son got married when I was a teenager. He's a really cool guy and we played Nintendo a lot whenever we visited. Anyway, the embarrassing story is about his bride. She decided that she wanted to sing to him at one point during the ceremony, so she chose the song "Wind Beneath My Wings" by Bette Midler. Midler is an alto. The bride was a high soprano. Unfortunately, she couldn't sing very well either. So for several minutes she squeaks this song out while he's standing there with the most awkward look on his face. I think everyone felt embarrassed. I know I did. The good thing is that they're still happily married and have a daughter. My friend got married around age 21. Neither he nor the bride had much money, so the wedding was modest but still very nice. They did have a lovely 3-tier cake though. The ceremony goes fine and the bride will cut the cake, music is playing. She was a dainty, tiny little thing, maybe 5 feet 2 inches and 100 pounds soaking wet. If she swatted a fly it might not even notice. She approaches the cake with the knife, barely touches it and boom. The whole thing immediately collapses. All 3 tears somehow, all over someone's elderly grandmother who was seated right by the ill-fated cake. That old lady, who had barely moved throughout the whole affair, shot out of her chair like she was fired from a cannon, screeching bloody goddamned murder and sending cake shrapnel all over those nearby. Another close friend and I watched the whole thing from close range and were paralyzed and purple from hysterical breathless laughter, as were many of the other guests. I later heard the bakery refunded them for the cake due to its not up to code construction. They should have charged them double for generating memories that no one there will ever forget. After arriving 45 minutes after the ceremony was to begin, during the ring exchange, the groom gets this blank look and says he didn't know he was supposed to buy her another ring. Sil slipped off her wedding band and handed it off to the preacher. My husband's brother having a seaside wedding. Our almost 2-year-old was the ring bearer. He passed off the rings to the best man, Dad, then toddled away, off the cliff. It was probably 60-80 feet drop to the beach below, but he luckily got caught up in the bushes, and husband snatched him up. He was buckled into his stroller after that. Kamikaze kid. I worked at a wedding venue for 4 years. Having to stop her bride's stepdad from hitting her over the head with a chair was a highlight. The whole room were just fighting with each other. The best man kicked the mother-in-law. Different wedding. Some donghead bit the DJ because he refused to play a certain song. For me, the absolute worst one was when the newlyweds were arguing at the end of the night in front of their young son. She admitted to cheating on him. It all came out there and then in front of his family and he was devastated. Brother and sister-in-law thought it would be fun to have their dogs walk down the aisle after their flower girl spread the flower petals. The dogs thought midway down the aisle was the perfect place for a shitting photo op on the white runner. Bride never showed up. My cousin was the groom and had about 500 people in attendance. He got on the mic and said there's no bride, so we had the party anyway. He married someone else 2 years later. The bride fainted and hit her head hard enough to go to the hospital in an ambulance. No refunds. So they amazingly still had the reception. Pretty subdued. We had a few drinks and just left. I went to a wedding in a huge manor house on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The house was lit up by big floodlights and the floor pointing up at the house. When it got dark, some guests ran inside to the bar/dance floor and shouted at people to come outside and look. A man and a woman, who met for the first time at the wedding, were having sex below one of the floodlights but didn't realize that their gyrations were being projected 50 feet high onto the side of the house. A perfect shadow of two shaggers. They were very embarrassed when they found out. Not a bad thing that happened for me, just really awkward. Went to wedding of someone from my church a few years back. When it came time to say the vows, he pulls out a sheet of paper and reads on for like 5 minutes, getting really intimate and pouring his heart out to her. It was kind of awkward tbh, but the icing on the cake was her response. When he was done, she just giggled loudly and awkwardly and got out ditto. That's it. That was her wedding vow. So freaking awkward. One of my wife's co-workers got married this past summer. Her father passed away from a fatal heart attack the morning of the wedding, but her family insisted and convinced her to go in with it. So she did. It was awkward as hell and nobody in the building made it through without crying. Even the minister. I worked weddings for a living and once saw the best man get loaded, give a speech, and profess his love of the bride and how they had slept together 2 nights before. Open bar. 1. Best man. 0. Divorced father of the groom started up about how much better his new wife was compared to his old wife. During his speech, on and the qualities of Asian women versus white women. I've never looked at my shoes so hard in my life. At my wedding, I'm Australian. We were getting to the speeches part of the night, but were waiting for me to come back from the toilets. The meal had not quite agreed with me and I was dealing with the consequences. My buddy who was being MC was currently stalling the 110-ish people and decided it'd be funny to come find me, wandering mic in hand. He enters the toilets and asks how much longer I'll be. I didn't know he had a mic, and that everyone was waiting for me, so replied quickly back with an angry duck off dunt. I'm doing a shit. I'll be done when I am duck I'm done. Much to the horror of the people in the next room. The groom's father was acting immature and rude towards everyone. The father was jealous of the attention he had to share with the wife's family. Oh, and one more. Grandmother broke her ankle dancing. Didn't want to bother anyone, so sat down for the rest of the night. A&E at 11 PM 3 hours later. Welsh grannies are hard. When my brother and new wife got to the hotel apologized for the rowdy lot in the bar. My brother said it's fine as they were our family. The sister of the bride who wasn't invited showed up drunk and got in a fight with the bride until the father of the bride broke it up by putting the sister in a chokehold and dragging her out of the venue. The bride was surprisingly fine afterwards. Source: I'm a wedding caterer. My mother-in-law handed out an EP of my now sister-in-law to as many guests as she could and threw a fit in the middle of the dance floor later that night because I didn't let her daughter sing with a band or karaoke. Her exact words were, "How dare you make today all about you? It was my wedding day." I once worked a wedding where one of the guests thought it would be perfectly reasonable to change her baby's shitty diaper on a table where other guests were eating. I offered to show her the restroom where we had a baby changing station or even an empty banquet room. But the disgusting bitch said she was finished and had the audacity to shove the dirty diaper at me and tell me to throw it away for her. The other guests looked both disgusted and mortified. Just prior to my sister's wedding ceremony beginning, as everyone was getting in place and last minute things were being done in this big old Catholic church, my father noticed a woman with a confused look at the back of the church and approached her, asking if she needed anything. She informed him she was the bride, then opened a beat up suitcase she had which contained something resembling a wedding type dress. My father, suspecting she had some mental health issues, played along, suggesting that she may be in the wrong church. When that didn't work, he slipped off and called the police. In the meantime, the lady walked up to my soon-to-be brother-in-law and said, "You aren't going to leave me this time." When the police pulled up to the church, the lady spotted them and made a quick exit. Turns out she had a habit of pulling the stunt. My brother-in-law still occasionally reminds my sister that he had a choice on their wedding day, but still chose her. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.